In Module 1, Lesson 9, we are going to be working with decimals and adding those decimals using the place value chart and then relating what we do on the place value chart to unit form and then standard form of addition of decimals. One of the vocabulary terms that we're going to revisit is place value discs, and we're going to be using those discs when we are working with our place value chart, and it's just a dot that is going to represent one unit under that specific designation on our place value charts. So let's start with this problem, 110 and 800ths plus 2 ones and 4 hundredths. Now we are looking at two different numbers here. We separate them on either side of the addition sign. So this 110 and 800ths is one number, and this 2 ones and 4 hundredths is another number. So I'm going to represent each of those on the place value chart. So I'm going to represent this side with blue dots. So I have 110, so I'm going to make one dot here, and then 800ths, so I go to the hundredths column, and I make 8 of these hundredths dots. Now I go to my other number, 2 ones and 4 hundredths, and I'm going to represent those with a purple dot. So I have 2 ones and then 4 hundredths, so I'm going to add those 4 hundredths here. Now some of the questions that you're going to ask yourself is, can I bundle? And if you remember, bundling means grouping 10 discs together, and it's going to make one disc in the column to the left. So we ask ourselves, do we have any areas where we could bundle discs? Here, hundredths looks like we might have 10, so let's count them out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I do have 10 discs, so I can take these and I can bundle them together, and they're going to move over into this column to make one disc in the tenths. Now I can look at my disc and just count up how many I have in each column. In the tens, I have a 1, 2 in the ones column, and I have my decimal. In the tenths, I have 1 column, and in the hundredths, I have these 2 remaining right here. So my answer is 12.12. Now let's take a look and see how we can relate that to unit form. So if I'm looking at my blue dots in unit form, which is how much is in each unit, I have 110 and 8 hundredths, which up here is represented. Then in looking at my purple dots, I would have 2 ones and 4 hundredths. Then when adding them together, I would add like with like. So I have 8 hundredths and 4 hundredths, which would give me 12 hundredths. And I'll just do that with an H. Then I only have 2 ones and 1 10. And then I would kind of put these all together to make my number. So I know I have 110, 2 ones, then I would have my decimal. And now here's where it gets interesting, because I have in my hundredths, I have 12, but I know I can only put one number in my hundredths column. So I have 1, 2 place values after my decimal or hundredths, and then you fill in those 12 hundredths. And that is the same answer. Now let's take a look at how we can relate it to a standard algorithm. So in a standard algorithm, when you're adding decimals, it's very important that you line up the place values and the decimals. So first I want to take my 2 numbers and write them in standard form, which is how we normally would see numbers. So I have 110, and since I don't have any ones, I'm going to write a 10. And then my hundredths, I know is 2 place values after my decimal, and so I'll stick in my 8. And then fill in my empty place value with a 0. So 110 and 8 hundredths is 10.08. Then over here, 2 ones and 4 hundredths, I have 2 ones. I have my decimal, and I know hundredths is 2 place values after my decimal. And then I fill in my number 4 in the hundredths. and then I have an empty space, so I put in a 0. Now I'm going to take these two numbers and I'm going to make sure that I line up my place values. So I have a 1 in the tens, a 0 in the ones, I have my decimal, a 0 in the tenths, and an 8 in the hundredths. I'm going to make sure that I line up my decimals, and I have 2 in the ones, so right underneath my ones I'm going to put my 2. I have my 0 in the tenths, so I'm going to line that up with my other tenths, and then in the hundredths I have 4. So I'm going to make sure I'm going to line that up. And now we are ready to add, and it's just like adding other numbers. We just have this decimal. And so we just ask ourselves, 8 plus 4 is 12. So we drop the 2, carry the 1. 1 plus 0 is 1. Our decimal drops down. And then 0 plus 2 is 2. And then 1 plus 0 is 1. So we have the same answer 3 different ways, and that is definitely a way to convince a skeptic. So let's take a look at this next problem. 148 thousandths plus 7 ones and 13 thousandths. So we want to make sure that we separate our two numbers and know that we are actually adding and which numbers go together. Now, this is really interesting because a lot of us in class said, oh, 148 thousandths, I am just going to make 148 dots in my thousands column. But guess what? That takes a really long time, and so we have to ask ourselves, what's a better way to think about creating 148 thousandths? And one of the ways that we talked about was turning that actually into a standard form. And how would we write 148 thousandths? After our decimal, thousandths would be 3 place values over. And then we fill in our number from the end, 8, 4, and 1. And now we can look at this and say, oh, I have 1/10. I have 4 hundredths. And I have 8 thousandths. Which is the same exact as 148 thousandths. I just bundled before I had to draw 148 thousandths discs. So let's take a look and add in our other number, 7 ones and 13 thousandths. So I'm going to put 7 in my ones column, 7 and 13 thousandths. I can even do the same thing here. I have 3 place values after my number, and I have a 3, a 1, and then an empty place value, so I have a 0. So I can know, okay, I have 0 tenths, I have 1 hundredths, and 3 thousandths. Now I'm going to ask myself, can I bundle? Is there anywhere that I might see 10 that I can bundle? And I'm going to look in thousands because there's quite a few here. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I do. So I can group these, I can bundle them together, and they would move over into the hundredths column and create an extra disc. And now I can go through and add up and see how many discs I have in each column. So here I have 7. My decimal, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the hundredths, and 1 left over in the thousandths. So my answer would be 7.161. So let's take a look and see if we can now do that in standard form. Up here, I already have my answers written in standard form, except I need to add a 7 from the ones here. And remember, when you're adding them, you really need to make sure that you are lining up your decimals. So I'll start here with my first number, a 1 in the tenths, a 4 in the hundredths, and an 8 in the thousandths. And I'm just going to put a 0 here so I don't get confused. And then I'm going to take my other number, 7 ones and 13 thousandths, My ones goes under my 0, which is also in the ones, my decimal, then a 0 in the tenths, a 1 in the hundredths, and a 3 in the thousandths. And then it's just adding like you would normally do. 8 plus 3 is 11, so I leave the 1 and carry the 10. 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 1 is 6. 1 plus 0 is 1. I drop my decimal down, and then 0 plus 7 is 7. And I have the same answer in 2 different ways, which would definitely convince a skeptic. So let's take a look at our homework, and I'm going to start with 1B. And what this is asking you is giving you a problem here, 12 tenths plus 9 tenths, and then it's asking you how many tenths altogether. And then it wants you to break those tenths down and decompose them or recompose them into ones and tenths. So let's take a look at what that would look like. So we have 12 tenths plus 9 tenths. How many tenths do we have altogether? 9 plus 12 is 21. So we have 21 tenths. Now it's asking us, out of that 21 tenths, how many of those are in the ones and how many are in the tenths? And sometimes it helps me to write 21 tenths in standard form. And so I know I have one decimal, or one place value after my decimal, so I'd have a 1 and a 2, and that just helps me see, oh, I have 2 ones and I have 1 tenth. So 21 tenths can also be written as 2 ones and 1 tenth. All right, so let's take a look at 1H. There's 4 ones and 4 tenths plus 4 tenths, and it's just asking us for tenths, which is interesting, but this gives us a chance to really unbundle these ones right here. So I'm actually going to show this up on the place value chart. So the first one, I have 4 ones, so I'm going to draw my 4 ones. I have 4 tenths. And then in my second number, I also have 4 tenths. Now, they only want us in tenths, but here I have some ones. So what I'm going to need to do is to unbundle these ones. So this one is going to come over and be 10 discs in the tenths place. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5. And I'm going to do that for each of the other ones. So now that I've unbundled all 4 of them, I'm going to count up how many tenths I have. I know each of these is 10, so I can say 10, 20, 30, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46. So 4 ones and 4 tenths. Oh, I made a mistake. This one should have been 4 also. So you always check your work. So I should have 4 D8 tenths. Now there's another way that you can do this, and that involves using the decomposition strategy that we were doing before. So I would write my 4 ones here and my 4 tenths and then my other 4 tenths, and I would add those together. So I would have altogether 4 ones and 8 tenths, and then I would decompose them into the tenths. So I'd move that 4 over and drop down the 8, which would give me also 48 tenths. Same answer as when I use the discs. All right, let's do one last problem, 2B, and this is asking us to solve using the standard algorithm. And so this up here, what we talked about, lining up your place values and your decimal, is going to be super important. So I rewrite this, and I would do 2 in my ones, my decimal, 0 in my tenths, 4 in my hundredths, and then I would take this number here and make sure that it all lined up. A 0 in the ones, my decimal, a 0 in the tenths, and a 7 in the hundredths, and then I would add them together. 4 plus 7 is 11, so I leave the 1 and carry the 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. drop down my decimal, and then 2 plus 0 is 2. So the answer to 2.04 plus 0.07 is 2.07.